Okay. Sean is not feeling well this morning, so when I walked in, he asked me if I would go ahead and teach what I was going to in the, young marrieds, young adults class. And so I think what I'm going to do is kind of back up and look at some areas that we've looked at previously, because I think it's something good that we can look at that can apply not only to married life, but to our relationships within the church and with one another. Before we get started, one thing that we normally do in our class is we go down through and we ask about anybody who's in need of prayers, and we make a list of that, and then we make sure that we pray for those when we have our prayer to start class. And I know one person that we definitely need to remember is John Hickman in our prayers. I know Bryson is still running a fever, and Allison is now sick. So we need to remember them in our prayers. Who else is there? Ned, yeah, need to remember Ned. And want to remember Miss Humphreys, that she'll be here. Adam always asks we remember her in our prayers. I think Chris Phillips I think she's still in need of our prayers too, because I think she was here Wednesday night, but she's still not doing well, so we need to remember her. Yes. So we've got quite a few that we do need to remember in our prayers. Who else was there? Yes. Sybil Turner, yes, need to remember her. I think we're going to have some young people on the road heading back to college either today or tomorrow, so we need to remember them because some of them are heading north, and from what I understand, the weather may be a little rougher up there. So. Okay. Jonathan says, "Don't look at me." Well, I'm looking to who's writing down, making the list, and I see right next to it somebody's making a list. Jonathan, would you mind doing the prayer for us this morning? Okay. What we're going to look at is principles a couple can apply to enhance their communication in their marital relationship. Now, and this breaks it down by first, second, and so forth, but the first thing a couple, and this says approach every discussion with a good, positive attitude, remembering the power of their words. Now, and I'm going to ask this, and most of y'all know when I teach a class, I like lots of discussion. I don't like to be the only one up here talking. For those that are couples in here that have been married a while, how many true discussions do you truly have? When it says approaching every discussion, are most of them discussions or arguments? Would you say that you have, when you're talking about problems within a marriage, are they discussions that you have? I guess nobody. You ain't saying. I'm not hearing anything from out there. It's like, we're not going to say we have arguments.
I think it depends on the level that it's elevated to.
So would you say you approach everyone with that attitude, with a good, positive attitude, and remembering the power of your words?
Well, you got to work it out no matter what. I mean, that's a lot of people look at it and just look and say, well, hey, if it doesn't work out, I'll find somebody else, or I'll get the road, or the bus, or whatever. See, to the Christian, that's not an option. So then you have to look at it. Well, does this cool off for a while, or we've got to work it out one way or another.
We've got to work it out one way or another. So
sometimes it's an argument that leads to a discussion or
sometimes. So too many. Go ahead. Kind of goes the full circle. Goes through the period of the nonverbal that we'll get to in a little bit. That you have to look at. If somebody would open up to Proverbs 18 verse 21, we're going to read a few scriptures here. And if somebody would read that way I'm not doing all the reading also. Proverbs 18 verse 21. Death and life are in the power of the tongue. So, in a relationship, we have to be cautious in what we say because it can cause a lot of harm. Now, as Christians, we know that we don't have a way out of marriage. I mean, it's till death. Well, we do. It's death. And it's like I've told the class, sometimes you're not sure who's going to kill who first. But life, it's for life, but many times in the things we say, we also treat it that way. We know we can say whatever we want and they don't have a way out of it. But is that the proper attitude we should have in a marriage? In the things we say.
Well, chapter 21, verses 9 and 19.
Go ahead and read that.
It's better to dwell in the corner of a house than with a brawling woman in a wide house. Or in verse 19, it also says it's better to dwell in the wilderness than with a contentious and angry woman.
So, we know that that's not the case. We've got to be cautious in what we say. Because you think about it, sometimes, you talk about life and death in the tongue. Sometimes that death may be a slow death. Exactly. So we have to be cautious in what we say. We have to, though, when we go into a discussion, before we say anything, and I've told the classes, your mind needs to go in motion before your mouth goes into gear. Think about what you're going to say before you say it. Make sure of the way it's going to come out. Now, second, a couple must remember that actions, the silent body language, gestures, often speak louder than words. How many times have you possibly known there was something bothering your spouse and you ask them and they're sitting like this and they go, nothing. And you're going, there's a problem. And you ask them again, there's nothing bothering me. Why do you ask? Well, you're telling me there is. Body language. And you can say something and it can come across, your words may sound one way, but your body language says something else. You watch somebody talking and they're doing this. What are you thinking? They're upset. Doesn't matter what their mouth is saying, all you see is this. It's their body language. The same way in a marriage. Be cautious in the way you behave and the way you cross your arms, the way you hold yourself, your facial expressions. All communication. It can improve your marriage. It can improve your relationship with those around about you in the church. Because many times when we do things in the church, we also forget about our body language. We forget about what we're going to say, what we're saying. We say it one way, but our body's telling somebody something totally different. So you have to be very cautious. And if we don't do those things that are necessary, we may cause more problems. And in the marital relationship, sometimes our body language can cause more trouble than the words that we say. The turning of our back, the raising of an eyebrow, the way we turn our head may tell somebody that we're upset and we're mad without us ever saying anything. So it's another thing that we need to be very, very cautious of. Third, a couple must strive to be active listeners. They need to hear the meaning of the words through the tones used and the expression of the body language employed. Now, what is a good listener? What's a good listener? Those who pay attention, those who listen with their ears. Do we only listen with our ears? Got to keep your mouth from moving so you can listen. There was, and I did this with the kids. I learned something back when I first started working in the car business that makes a lot of sense. It's called LAER. Listen, acknowledge, explore, and then respond. Now, if I'm listening to someone and what they say, and the example I use a lot of times when I've taught classes is, somebody comes into a car dealership and they tell somebody, I want a vehicle with lots of power. The first thing they hear is, I want something that goes fast, that has lots of horsepower, and it'll get down the road in a hurry. Well, if they take that person over and start showing them a Mustang, that person may be saying, I want something with power windows, power locks, cruise, tilt. I want all the power things in there. They weren't listening. They heard what the person said, but they weren't listening because they didn't acknowledge them. And in an argument, it's simply by saying, so what you're saying is, you want a vehicle with lots of power. Now, do you mean, what am I getting ready to do? I'm getting ready to explore. I'm getting ready to explore what? What do they mean? Do you mean a vehicle that has power windows and locks? Or are you talking about lots of horsepower? Explore what they're saying, because what we say is not always what we mean. And I'm going to ask the married couples again, has your spouse ever said something and you thought they meant something else and you got upset about it? I'm seeing some of this. No, never. Of course we have. They say something, and all of a sudden, what happens? We blow up. And I say we being the men because a lot of times we do that. Our wives say something, and we think they're attacking us when they're not really. They're simply expressing something. I see a lot of giggling going on over here. Do y'all know what I'm talking about or something? So, this happens a lot because what we forget to do is make sure we understand what they're saying before we respond. And we've all done that. We listen, but we don't acknowledge, or maybe we do acknowledge, but it's in the wrong way. We acknowledge by we've already forgotten to explore, and we're responding already. So, and as Christians, we need to do that too. Because we may have young Christians who are saying something, but they don't fully understand. And so, when they're saying it, we automatically jump way over here instead of acknowledging what they say, exploring to find out what they're meaning by what they're saying, because they may not be saying it in the way that they may not be meaning what they say. And we're automatically responding. So as Christians, we need to be doing the same thing, making sure we understand what the individuals are saying and what they mean by that. Now, one of the other things that also will help in this same aspect is what can be called feel, felt, and found. Because a lot of times, the way somebody feels, we felt before until we found something out. And you think about it, and it sounds strange. I know how you feel, but I felt that way before until I found out. Because we may have information they don't have. And sometimes that can help in a marriage relationship and in the Christian relationship with one another. There's a lot of things that go on within a church that more mature and older members of the church know about because they've been there, they've found things out, and we need to listen to them and gain from their experience as long as it is according to the Word of God. And they use the Word of God to do those things, to show those things. So we need to be able to do the same thing with, sometimes we have to do that with the older members of the church too, because we know how they feel, because we felt that way before until we found out what the Scriptures truly said. And explain that. But listen from both sides. Explain it. Don't expect everybody to know automatically. Okay. Fourth, the couple needs to verify what they hear by asking questions, which is kind of what we've already covered. Let's go to Proverbs 13, 15, and 16. Good understanding produces favor, but the way of the treacherous is hard. Every prudent man acts with knowledge, but a fool displays folly. So we need to make sure our understanding is correct of what we're doing. Ask questions. Now, we've discussed this in the class 4, the fact that men and women think differently. Whether we like to admit it or not, men and women do not think the same. So we have to ask the questions. We have to have an understanding. And sometimes when you ask a question and you get an answer, you've got to explore that question even farther because you didn't get the answer that you expected to get. And men a lot of times are this way. When we ask a question, we already know what the answer we expect. We know which direction we're headed. We know which direction we want it to go. And when it doesn't go that way, sometimes we get frustrated because that wasn't the right answer that we expected to come back. Most women, when they ask a question, they truly are asking a question to get an answer because they don't know. And as a man, a lot of times when we're asked a question, we think they already know the answer, so because that's the way we think. They already know what that answer is, so why are they asking me that question? They're trying to trap me. They're trying to start an argument when that's not necessarily the case. So we have to be asking the questions. We have to make sure we hear the questions correctly before we answer. Fifth, a couple must select their words carefully and be specific in what they say. But what does that mean? Select your words carefully and be specific in what you say.
Say something to make it worse.
Now, how often do we do that? I'm here to laugh over here. In the middle of an argument, how often do we actually do that? We normally do just the opposite. We get into an argument and we say the first thing that comes to our mind, which may or may not have anything to do with the argument that's going on at the time. Yeah, I know that doesn't happen to any of y'all, does it? No, not those. Paul, you can say that. Sandy's not in here. You can get away with it. I know. I've already told the class, those in my class, those things happen. Now, the question comes, if you're in an argument with your boss at work, or quote unquote, a discussion, are you going to say the first thing, well, no, what am I going to say with Paul? Paul is the boss. But with the rest, if you're in an argument with your boss at work, are you going to say the first thing that comes to your mind? Or are you going to stop and think about what you're going to say before you say it? You're going to stop and think before you say it, because your thought process goes, if I say this, he's going to fire me. So how can I say this without actually saying that? And so you rephrase your words, you say it in a politically correct way, and you walk out of there. And before he realizes that you've actually maybe made fun of him, you've made him sound like an idiot, all of a sudden you're out of there and he's like, wait a minute, what just happened? But you said it in such a way he didn't get mad. Now, why don't we do that at home? Why is it in an argument at home the first thing we do is say what comes to our mind? Do we put more emphasis on work than we do our marriages, in our family? I don't think that's the case. I think what happens is too often when we're at home, we relax. We're comfortable. We say what we want to because we're at home. And men especially, we're the king of our castle. So we can say what we want because we're the king there until the queen takes us down a few notches. So, but you know what I mean. We basically say what we want, and that's not necessarily the smartest thing to do. I mean, you think about Christ. When Christ said things, his words were chosen very carefully. Direct to the point, but those words were chosen carefully. And he said things differently to different people. He didn't just come right out and say things to certain people. He said it in such a way they could understand it. And we should be doing the same thing. We should be with one another, teaching one another. We should be doing things in the same way we do at work when we're at home. Being cautious in what we say, not wanting to upset our spouses, because aren't they the ones that we should be cherishing the most? And we talked about, y'all haven't talked about this, but in the class that we've had earlier, we talked about the fact of putting our spouses upon a pedestal and how they should be. And the fact that one young man went in to the preacher, he went to the preacher and said, listen, he said, I think I have a problem. He said, I think I'm putting my wife on too high of a pedestal. And he goes, I'll ask you one question. Have you put her above God? He said, no. He said that she's not on too high of a pedestal. Are we doing that? Are we putting our wives on that pedestal? And at the same time, wives, are you putting your husband first? Is he the most important thing in your life? As Sarah would call him, is he your Lord under God? Is he the ruler of your house? Now you think about it, if the husband's putting the wife up here, and the wife is putting the husband up here, and they both are considering themselves down low in comparison to that, what type of relationship does that generate? When you think about it, they're both putting each other higher. And isn't that what we're supposed to do as Christians also? Put one another above ourselves? Being humble? Always looking to the others? Looking to their needs? What's important to them? Now here's probably one of the hardest things. 6, the couple must accept the feelings of others without condemning them. Accept the feelings of others without condemning them. Now I know this has probably never ever happened to any of y'all. When your wife is feeling a certain way and you say, well, it's stupid to feel that way. How can you feel like that? Y'all have never said anything like that, have you? I'm seeing laughing back there. Why is that? Because we don't feel that way. As men, it's this way or it's this way. There's nothing in between. You either got to be here or here, otherwise forget it. Women aren't that way. They're more emotional. They have those feelings. And we have to understand that if they feel that way, that's correct to them. And I've used this for perception is reality. Now think about it. Perception is reality. Your perception of things is reality. Now, does that make sense? If I perceive that it's this way, then it's that way. It doesn't make any difference what anybody else says. Whether it's right or not. And the references I'm using business a lot. When a customer comes in and perceives the deal to be a good deal, it doesn't matter whether we're losing money or making money. If it's a good deal to them, it's a good deal. I may think it's a terrible deal because I'm losing money. But to them, it's a good deal. And then again, I may be making $4,000 and they think it's a good deal. So it's a great deal. It's all perception. And that is reality. Same thing in marriage. If you perceive that your spouse cares about you, that they love you, that they're there for you, whether they are or not, is irrelevant. It's kind of like the story that was told of the man who, he didn't have a good job. He could rarely take care of his family. But his wife said that he loved her more than anything. Every day, he had a job. He didn't make a lot of money. So, they never had a lot. Every day, he would bring her flowers. He would bring her some little something. She perceived that everything was great in their life. Because of that. Whether it was or not was irrelevant. To her it was. Her perception was one way. Other people perceived that they were downtrodden, that there were lots of problems. No, to her it was great. She had the best marriage in the world. Everything was wonderful. Their family was wonderful. They were extremely happy. Why? She perceived it to be that way. Didn't matter what anybody else thought. Their perception. We have to, though, be able to look at others and their feelings and understand that they have those feelings, that they have those thoughts, and accept them in that way. And it's probably, wives can do that easier than husbands. Because, like I said, men are this way. We can put blinders on. That's what we see. That's it. It's black or white. Rarely do you have men who are, there's a little gray area here. No, it's this way or it's that way. So women can more easily understand the feelings of others and accept them for that than men can. So as men, that's something that we have a lot to work on in being able to accept the feelings of others without condemning them, especially our spouses. Anybody have any comments? Just jump right in. Don't be bashful. We're getting close. Like I said, I'm used to teaching the young marriage, not a group that's been married for a long time. Seventh, it's imperative that the couple be completely open and honest in what they say. Be completely open and honest doesn't mean you always say what you think. In what you say, be completely open and honest. Be completely open and honest with each other in the things about your relationship, but it doesn't mean you always just say what you think. Sometimes the best course of action is silence. The old silence is golden. We have to be careful about that. Make sure that at times we are silent, that we don't say anything. Because sometimes, especially men, we like to solve problems also. So if our wife has a problem, we've got to solve it. She comes to you with the problem. Sometimes all she wants to do is just tell you about the problem. She doesn't want you to solve it. So silence can be golden. 8, a couple must never resort to nagging or criticism in their efforts to communicate. I thought it was interesting. I had a question that came up in the class How many times do you have to say something for it to be nagging? There is no specific number. The first time it's said, it can be considered nagging, depending on how it's said. It can be said 100 times and not be nagging, depending on how it's said. Now, we always hear about the nagging wife. That's why, I think in this book, it puts in here nagging or criticism. Now, you think about it, criticizing one another. Men are more apt to criticize than women. Women are more apt to nag than men. Or at least that's the way it's perceived anyway. So we have to be careful that we're not nagging or criticizing in an effort to communicate. Now, it's important that we not do those things. However, more often than not, that's what we wind up doing because we're not doing some of the other things that we should be doing. Ninth, we're trying to get through this as quick as a couple must respond to what is said and not become defensive. Respond to what's being said and not become defensive. So how do we do that? It's hard. It's very hard. Because when something's said, the first thing we do is, you're attacking me. How can we keep that from happening? When a couple is married, what do they become? They become one. So every time they're saying something about you, aren't they also saying something about themselves? Are you not one? Are you not together? Or is that not through that oneness? So if we're taking it as criticism and become defensive about it, why? We also have to be sure that when we're doing this, that we're not trying to change that person into what we think they ought to be. Because when you do that, what's going to happen? They're going to become defensive. I mean, how many of us are going to get defensive, even at work? If somebody comes in and starts trying to change you into something that you're not, are you going to get upset? Become defensive? Of course we are. Why won't we do that at home too? In a marriage relationship, a lot of times we have to look back and remember why we married that person. What was it that we found in them originally that we fell in love with that made us want to marry them? So we're not trying to change them, and sometimes by not changing them, we change them. Because they become the people we want them to without us necessarily even having to tell them what we want them to become or what we think they ought to be. Because they mature, they grow, they become more like us. I mean, Sandy will tell you that Laura's hard-headed. When we got married, she wasn't hard-headed. Everybody will tell you I was a hard-headed one. She's become more like me. She's a little more hard-headed. So, some people say I can reason at times a little bit, but only occasionally when I have to. So we have to be careful not to try to change them, otherwise they will become defensive. At the same time, if somebody's giving us criticism, especially our wife, our husband, take that for what it is, to help us improve, not as an attack on our person. And 10th, the couple must always be genuine and sincere. When you're in a discussion, in an argument, be sincere, be genuine about what you say. Don't say it just to hurt. How often in an argument does a couple bring something up that happened 6 months ago, a year ago, 2 years ago, 3 years ago, and the only purpose of that is, you hurt me, so I'm going to hurt you. And I know that hurts you. Be honest, be sincere, be genuine, be honest, be sincere in what you say in your relationship, and it'll only help you to grow. That pretty well covers the communication. Any comments, thoughts? Ephesians 4:32. And be kind to one another, tender-hearted, forgiving each other, just as God in Christ also has forgiven you. Very true. We need to be doing that in our marriages, in our relationships with one another, because then we will grow. And we'll also be forgiven by God. We don't forgive others, God won't forgive us. And that same thing is true in a marriage relationship. If we can't forgive our spouse, how can we expect God to forgive us? Any other comments, thoughts? Until next week. Hopefully Sean will be better.